We don't get, that's not.
The water.
Yeah.
It is very, it's the best water. It's actually my favorite kind.
That's great. Tell us on
We are almost there. Sorry, stand by.
That is not the most capturing. That's it.
Do you want this? Are you sure?
Yeah.
Because
I'd rather look with that.
wow, I so disagree with that.
Stand by.
Can't tell you how much I don't feel that. Are you sure? Because
No, I'm sure.
I'll take the
I'm sure.
hit.
No, I'm sure.
One slight little
What's
tech
that?
issue. I just can't get the mute.
Hi, James.
Oh,
I'd rather look with that.
oh, that's weird. Why is that not?
I refreshed it already.
Are you sure?
Very strange. I've never seen it do that.
But then it's a slight little tech issue. I just
Why is that not?
Hi, James.
Oh,
No. I'd rather look.
maybe.
oh, that's weird. Why is that not? Oh, technology, you drive me.
Refreshed it already.
Well, that's very strange. I've never seen it do that.
But then it's a little tech issue. I just.
Well, I guess we can turn it off. That's not gonna affect. Okay,
Let's
and then
just-
pull up the Zoom just so you see what's actually on camera, so you can see what's in frame. All right,
Yeah.
we're good.
Okay, we're good. Good. Tech is good. We're live. Hello and welcome to the launch of MANBOOBS with Komail, Aijazuddin, and Adam Eli. My name is Bella Florence, and I'm a volunteer here at the Bureau of General Services Queer Division. The Bureau is an all-volunteer, independent queer bookstore that opened in 2012 and has been hosted by the LGBT Community Center since 2014. Our regular hours are Wednesdays through Sundays, 1 to 7 p.m., and we often stay open later for events like tonight's. As a volunteer organization, we're dependent on donations and sales to fund our operations. If you won't be purchasing books tonight, we ask you to consider making a donation to support our work. I'll pass around a bag with some change in it, but you can also make a donation on Venmo by scanning the QR code on the donation bag, or for those of you joining us online by finding us on Venmo at EGSQD. Thank you for your support. If you are not yet on our email list and would like to be, you can sign up for our bi-weekly newsletter at the back of the room or on our website, bgsqd.com. And you'll receive the newsletter every other Monday. This will keep you updated on all of our upcoming events and activities. Before I introduce the hosts of tonight's event, I'd like to read a land acknowledgement and a call for a ceasefire in Gaza. The Bureau acknowledges that our organization operates on the unceded land of the Munsee Lenape. We encourage you to join the Bureau in signing up to make a monthly donation to the American Indian Community House's Mannahatta Fund. The Mannahatta Fund, according to its website, is an invitation to all settlers and non-native people who wish to acknowledge the legacy of theft and genocide that comprise the history of New York City and the United States. And you can find out more at mannahattafund.org. We also want to recognize that today, September 18th, is the 348th day of Israel's genocidal campaign against the Palestinian people, funded by our tax dollars and enabled by your government's unwavering support. We hope that you will join us in calling for an immediate permanent ceasefire, the release of all detainees held by Israel, the release of all hostages held by Hamas, an end to the siege of Gaza, and an end to the Israeli occupation of Palestinian territories in order to stop the collective punishment of Palestinians and to ensure the swift delivery of desperately needed food, water, medicine, fuel, and humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza. Our greater hope is for peace, justice, and liberation from oppression for all people everywhere. I'll now introduce Adam Eli, who will join Komail in conversation. Adam Eli is a community organizer and writer based in New York City. His first book, The Nuclear Conscience, was published in 2020 by Blue.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. And I think that we decided today to start off with a reading.
Yeah,
So I'm going to pass the stage.
thank you, Roger. Thank you all for being here. It's very kind of you. I know it's midweek, so to a lot of you. I'm so excited to be at the center of what this is, to be able to talk to you about this. But the section that I wanted to read out to you was it's the first time I went into a gay club, essentially. I was in Montreal. I moved there for college, and the only thing you need to know about the reading is that my friend is called Gibran, and we were middle school and high school together, and we're both in Montreal at the same time. And this is kind of what transpired. I secretly hoped that my first time entering a gay club would be like the crescendo of Hello Dolly. Me, feathered and besequined, descending an ornate gold staircase as the choir of adoring gays sang, "It's so nice to have you back where you belong," and in warm, welcoming baritones. That I didn't wear sequins was only the first disappointment of the evening. I scanned the crowd outside the club as we crossed a cobblestone street in the gay village, the words to some enchanted evening playing on a loop inside my head despite the faint, dull thumps of the bass coming from inside the building. "Are you excited?" Gibran asked me, as we took our place in line behind the man in a latex bodysuit. "Just breathe," he added when he saw my face. "It's going to be fun." "Nice t-shirt," the bouncer said as he stamped my hand with the club's rooster insignia. The entrance led us through a series of narrow hallways where packs of sleeveless steroids silently stalked the darkened corners of a vast subterranean labyrinth. The club's entrance reeked of bleach and sweat, its painted black walls nearly entirely covered by a decade's worth of posters and flyers. Safe sex, use a condom, dignity with HIV, drag rainbow. Most of the messaging about gay sex in the early 2000s, well before the miracle in HIV prevention drug PrEP, or campaigns like Undetectable equals Untransmittable, revolved around the pervasive but persuasive fear of contracting HIV. Any mention of gay intimacy in the popular imagination was nearly always intertwined with a militantly antiseptic enforcement of same sex. Most gay men like me, who came of age after the worst of the AIDS crisis, but before the peace of mind of PrEP, internalized these warnings as gospel. Dangerous. Not everyone my age shared this sense of impending infection. My new coterie of straight girlfriends at college, for example, would often talk over our Sunday brunches about their latest sexual conquests. One realizes very quickly that college kids only ever talk about drugs or sex unless they have access to neither, in which case they talk about Foucault. And I was shocked by their cavalier attitudes about not using the condom. "Aren't you afraid?" I asked, already imagining their future of plasma tests and T-cell counts. "Why?" the girls would reply, utterly unbothered. "I'm on the pill." Moments like these confirmed that we lived in different realities, they and I. While straight people used condoms to prevent life, gay men used them to avoid death. Well-meaning as the safety campaigns were, they often ignored the pressing stigma they enforced on the psyche of generation of gay men who were told daily that their sex, and usually only their sex, was inherently unsafe, essentially dirty, and inevitably lethal. Most of the world views gayness, particularly male gayness, as a sex act before it's anything else. That's wrong for a variety of reasons, only the third of which is that if a boy thinks of himself as gay, particularly as a young child, it probably isn't because he's participated in a sex act, but because he's experienced romantic feelings for another man. The distinction might seem small to you, but it makes the difference between life and death. Despite my best efforts, sex did not constitute a major wedge of my pre-pie chart at college, but my identity as a gay man did. What was the difference? Even if I ignored my history in Lahore and the pervasiveness of secret homosexual sex in places like Pakistan, a part of me knew intrinsically that gay men were not simply men who slept with other men who fell in love with other men. I wanted a whole life, not a single night. Gibran and I walked past a large plastic replica of Michelangelo's David, wearing a leather harness, and entered a massive dance hall, its basilican proportions soaring up to a firmament of twinkling disco balls. Hundreds of sweaty men writhed on a huge checkered dance floor in the center of the room, All of them monotonously shirtless and unforgivably chiseled. The ones who looked most like porn stars were already dancing on the raised platforms to a remix of the latest Britney song. That actually is a porn star, Gibran confirmed when I pointed to a particularly offensive set of abs to our right, and we squealed out together in voyeuristic joy. This was now a glamorous new reality. After an uneventful hour of awkward eye contact with strangers and sipping Cosmos, Gibran suggested we hunt separately, and before I could reply, he was already chatting to a handsome redhead across the bar. I envied him his natural ease with strangers, the currency of gay socializing. I walked over to a prominent corner of the bar and arranged myself on a red leather stool in what I hoped was a masculine sprawl, but probably looked like incontinence. I wasn't alone. Nearly every man in there was performing in some kind of way, and only a conspicuous handful of us weren't shirtless. We, the fellow devotees of the Order of the Sisters of Perpetual Modesty, lurked in the darkness like deep-sea creatures waiting for passing prey to float down. An hour later, Gibran found me hiding next to a vending machine for condoms, his t-shirt already drenched in sweat from dancing to barbecue. Girl, he said, grabbing my hand and dragging me into the mass of sweaty dancers. It's time to have some fun. ABBA came on, and there was a collective shriek as a burst of sparkling confetti exploded over the dance floor. More half-naked bodies joined the crowd, and just as I let my guard down, I felt a calloused hand slide up my shirt and stroke my left tit. How dare you, I screamed, clutching my hand. I looked down to see a cute brunette with plucked eyebrows, big arms, and small calves gyrating into my hips. Where are you from, handsome? Pakistan, I said, smiling tentatively. He growled in my ear. I love Arab men. I'm not actually Arab, I said. What? He shouted over the drum beat to a Cher song. I repeated myself, but something about the way he slurred, I love Arab cock, suggested he hadn't heard me. 2004 was a very ambivalent time for gayness in mainstream Western culture, when Grace was on TV, always meant for straight people. But saying that's okay was still an entirely acceptable way to denigrate something. American legislative bodies were passing an extraordinary number of laws to limit gay people's roles in public life. I remember seeing an ad on TV that began with two young men looking at each other in the hallway like secret lovers. One nods, and the other follows him into an abandoned garden. I think, oh my God, they're gonna do it. They inch closer and closer to each other, lips near enough to touch, until one boy abruptly whips out a pack of cigarettes from his jeans. Are they gay? The narrator asks in a menacing tenor as the two boys take turns lighting their cigarettes. Or are they smoking? Remember, it's gay to smoke. I came out to my dormmates on the first day I arrived in Montreal, naively assuming that as a foreigner from Pakistan, I was merely catching up with everyone else's sexual emancipation. Surely these Western kids who'd grown up with proms and malls and multiplexes were light years ahead of me. Later that day, I came back from a poster sale in the quad to find a note scrawled on my room door. Faggot. My parents were following me from the elevator, so I quickly wiped the message off with the cuff of my sleeve and pretended nothing had happened. The sense of panic was all too familiar. My ears throbbed, my vision narrowed, my chest tightened. It took me some hours to remind myself that I was not wrong here. Here, in Canada, 2003, I was legal. I was, definitely, safe. Within months, these thoughts were joined by the depressing realization that in the college dorm, 600 mostly white students, I was the only one I knew who was out. In retrospect, this was the first crack in my shaky assumption that gayness was an exclusively Western and entirely white construct. But I tried not to think about it too much for the rest of my sexless year in Montreal. Eventually, a smattering of others did come out of the closet and would work, but I looked at them as one would at soldiers arriving late to a battle I'd been fighting alone for months. It wasn't simply my peers' apparent reticence about their sexuality that made me feel like an outsider in the gay world abroad. It was also that everyone in the clubs looked like another white clone soldier in an army of Botox and biceps. And in the days before the apps like Grindr made hookups easier, the general impression was that to meet any man, I would have to rely on the awkward art of cruising. Pathologically trained by Lahori drawing rooms to avoid unsolicited conversation, let alone aggressive eye contact, I was as good at cruising as I was at hockey, not least because, disarmed of my wit and words, my body was left to do most of the talking. Despite my weight loss, my body and I were still never far away from calling our lawyers to start divorce proceedings. I still dressed in oversized clothes, habitually tugging at my chest to create the illusion that it was the fabric and not my tits that bulged. while the rest of me I hid behind a slew of well-structured jackets and voluminous scarves. Overdressed, but underwearable, I spent the next several months going to gay clubs with Gibran on the weekends, only to leave every night feeling like the homely vicar's daughter at a Jane Austen ball. The clubs didn't feel just intimidating, they felt hostile, angrily insistent on a manicured homogeneity of which I was quite literally incapable. Plus, and I don't care how many times sociopaths tell me to love my body, there was no way I was going to go shirtless in a room of 500 strangers whose closest adult relationship was with a pair of 50-pound dumbbells and a box of prescription-strength laxatives. Gibran, poor thing, patiently listened to me complain over our weekly brunches until he eventually suggested I try online dating. We sat together in Tim Hortons at Wild West early hookup forums, looking for love. No, not love, looking for an epic smile. Yes, much better. My first date was with a boarding 44-year-old white man who was studying to become a priest at a rural seminary school. After dinner, we made out in a dark park behind a World War II memorial because the movie we wanted to see was sold out. And later, he began crying in my armpit about his mother. I had to remind myself of the snowy walk home that my first kiss was actually Sally. And that's the section.
That was so poignant and so funny, which I think really, to me, defines the book. And so I was wondering, for someone who's not familiar with the book or your work, how would you describe the book?
Well, the elevator pitch for the book is that it's a funny memoir about growing up gay and fat in Pakistan in the global south, but told from the perspective of musical theatre. But that being said, it's about more than trauma and carbs. And then we can go. It's also about essentially trying to figure out what a global gay identity can feel like and what being gay around the world can feel like, which is often not something like, at least I haven't seen reflected very much in contemporary discourse. It's something that I think there's a reason for that. Perhaps it's because it takes people standing up and working and doing, engaging in their work, and a certain amount of madness and courage to be able to start doing this. It's about all those things.
In pop culture.
And pop culture. Well, yeah, American culture also, which is a standard, I think. The idea that one of the stranger things for me when I got to less so in Canada, but in college in America was just a surprise that I had seen things like Hello Dolly, or that I knew what Broadway was, or I had an opinion on Bachelor Bone. These were very disturbing to people that I encountered. And I think it was because the image of what they thought that they knew where I came from and the person in front of them was just so dissonant, they had no idea how to marry that. And that kind of, that's the barrier that I wanted to explore with the book, which is to explain that while I'm here and so many like me from around the world, you kind of have to then and everyone expands the idea of what it means to be gay. And that it's not something that simply exists in tenuous connection to the West Village or indeed the LGBT center, but that if that safety is replicable, that's kind of what I'm just figuring out.
Again, beautiful, fun. So before I knew which reading we were going to do, I had already written this question.
Yeah, great minds think alike.
But when you just described your early experiences in a gay club, seemed to be intimidating and hostile and angrily insisting on manicured homogeneity, of which I was quite literally incapable. And I think that's something that I can identify with when I first walked into a gay nightclub, and I imagine that a bunch of other people in this room have also felt displaced in places that are supposed to be for us. And so I guess my question is, what would you say to someone that's currently feeling that type of displacement or aggression in a queer space? And also, what can all of us do to help negate the very, very real xenophobia, aphobia, racism, transphobia that exists in queer spaces? Super light question.
What would I say to them? I would say that you can find your own space if you look for it. That being said, part of me doesn't believe that, because a lot of the all the phobias you're talking about, the homophobia, the fat phobia, all of those are a result, they don't exist with, I don't think that they exist within the queer community in a vacuum. I think that they exist in and around us, of which the community then becomes a subset. And one of the things in the book that I had mentioned was how my advice to someone like that would be to be aware that sometimes you're running from the same enemy, but that does not mean that you're on the same side. And I find that the intersectionality, particularly with the queer identity, which is essentially what we're talking about, to the queer space being able to have enough, which it does, enough space for an entire gamut of people, it requires a certain, it requires larger work across the society, but it essentially requires showing up and invading those spaces and making sure that you're there, and not allowing that to be taken away. It's easier said than done, because you often it's very scary to go into a place like that, particularly when I was an 18-year-old kid and I grew up thinking about these things, and I thought honestly that it would be like Hello Dolly. It wasn't even a joke to me. I honestly thought when you go into a gay club, like queer as folk, it would be like, which it was, I guess, but if you were white and had out, so yeah, it was a very clear like distinction where they went to. But I found myself surprised that I couldn't find an access point. Also, that's because clubs in the late 90s and early 2000s they were very specific in how they worked. It was like circuit parties. I didn't necessarily. Now it's a little bit different. The queerness is evolved. So I hope, but essentially the answer would be to then show up and to make sure, but then also to fight that same battle across the board anywhere, not simply in queer spaces, but in any space.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like the word that you used, invade, the idea of like invading a space that's supposed to be for you, but maybe isn't. And I noticed that you ended your book, or one of the ending notes was a story about drag invasion, and your experience in Fire Island, a space where many people, myself included, don't always feel so welcomed. Yeah. And I was wondering if you could tell everyone what drag invasion is, why you felt that was important to share, and why you felt like that was a good part of the ending.
Right. Well, Fire Island generally was many of the people in the audience today. I'd already sold the book, and so it was out there. And then I went. And then it was my first time in Fire Island like that, and I never experienced everything you say is true. It isn't like all of there's I can imagine and I can see it. Also, I feel it myself. Everyone feels it. I think that's the point of exclusion, is I don't think anyone feels included, even if you look a certain way. Like they're the most insecure, actually.
I think that's true.
Side note, that's also a great way to like. It's a cruel thing to do, but if you have like the right lines to say, you can make someone feel very insecure very quickly about that kind of presentation of masculinity, which often comes across as strength. But I found that going back to Fire Island, what I found was that it was the only place that straightness did not exist. And I'd never experienced that before. I'd never been in a place where everyone else was gay or queer or whatever, that people wear kaftans, and that people, like if you had a Celine Dion t-shirt on, it would be like people would clap and they would get it. They would say, like, did you listen to All About Love? And all of these things, and rather than the ridicule of them. And I'm not suggesting that it's like that everywhere in the straight world, but I've never been in a place where heteronormativity didn't exist. And it was incredible. And it was also incredible to me to see older gay men who I hadn't seen very many older gay couples around me. Because one of the things that I was interested in also with Fire Island was with drag invasion one is hereditary rituals, which I think as gay people or queer people were creating as we kind of go along. What does a gay wedding look like? What does a gay marriage look like? What does a gay divorce look like? All of these things that which everyone around us is kind of socialized in very, very early. I find that some of the the way that inheritance works in Fire Island, the way that people, mentorship works. I mean, there's a lot of community that exists alongside the more superficial kind of. I'm not sure if it's a decided thing, but I think that also it attracts a certain kind of, by virtue of being, it's designed. So, I mean, again, in something like that, often those spaces, there are not that many people of color, but it's important then to be there because when I go to tea or something and I look around, I see someone else who has a daily life. So I think it gives me strength in my life, which is I think the way, and it was important for me to end it there for this very reason, for the fact that drag invasion then becomes a right I inherit as about something American and no one can say shit, which is a kind of in my head, a violent kind of appropriation because it makes sure to kind of to create that image. And I want it to because it is open to it. It should be. And that's kind of the thing that you find out very much with inclusions. Once you're there, then you start building, right? You just need to get in that track. So that's why I included it in the book. And I think it was important because it was the only place that I ever felt that gay. That's safe. I don't know how else to describe it.
No, that makes sense. And I love how you speak of drag invasion as like a hereditary ritual. And I think that coming from Jewish background, so many of our hereditary rituals or holidays are based on the, like there's an old adage that goes like, the Jewish holiday is basically like, they tried to kill us, we survived, now let's eat. And it's true in drag invasion. And it really is
It's a
true.
great thing to say.
100%. And so in drag invasion is like that, you know, someone was told they weren't allowed to be in drag, so a bunch of other people came to drag and now they do it every year.
Yeah.
And so if we're creating hereditary rituals, that also means that we're creating icons and gods or things to gather around, people to gather around.
Yeah, totems.
And I think totems, and I think that so much of your book talks about like drag invasion, like putting on femininity, seeing femininity through the lens of certain women in pop culture. And so I would like to know, I think this is an inherently subjective question, but I would like to know what your definition of a gay icon is. Yours.
Got it. Well, I guess when I think about gay icons, the thing that comes to mind is usually someone who's been through it. More often than not, they're people who've been through enormous amount. We identify with gay men, but you identify with the struggle with someone else. Particularly in the straight world, you can always tell when someone else has suddenly woken up and figured out that it's not the way it was presented. Which gay people you kind of figure out very, very early on. But I've always thought that a gay icon is someone who not just has been through it, but can kind of and use that strength that they've derived from that to then help someone else. To which this building is a testament. I think that people like him as a gay icon, being able to use rage as a way to further the lived experience of those who come after you. I think that's iconic. And I think that when it serves the purpose, I thought about iconography a lot in my painting as well. The idea of what an icon is, what we worship, what values we project, and what we think this deity is able to provide. It's not just, I mean, pretty dresses and stuff, yes, but also a sense that they're fighting for you. I think Madonna is not only an icon for her tits, but also because of the what the work that she did with HIV. It's the same thing with Liz Taylor. You can kind of trace this intersectionality of oppression, figuring out that it shouldn't be. That's my definition.
I think it's a really strong.
Yeah.
I had the pleasure of going to your a different book event that you did, where you spoke about the original title of the book, which I just thought was so genius. And so I was wondering if you could tell us what the original title is, and also if there's anything else that got left on the cutting room floor that you wanted to include, or we're told suggested that you shouldn't.
Strongly.
Yeah.
Yeah. There were a lot of like, do you think?
Yeah.
So the title of the book obviously is MANBOOBS, and the title of the book when I sold it was Urban Cake. And my editor didn't like that because he thought that it sounded like a cookbook by a widow who's baking her way through grief. And the moment he said it, I couldn't like unhear it. It started. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. And I'd always wanted MANBOOBS. Day one, it had been the one, but a valid criticism of the title was that it would make it unserious, but that it should be. But the title itself was important to me because the word itself exists between what we consider masculine and feminine. And I have a feeling a lot of the revulsion that the word invokes in us is precisely the kind of space I wanted to look at, because there's a reason you feel this sense, or like some people may feel the sense of disgust with a man with breasts. So what does that imply? What is fat phobia? How does that work? What, is he less of a man if he has breasts? Are they less of a woman if they don't? Do you know what I mean? Like those, and there's so much in to me in the touch. That and the fact that I mean, they were there. So it felt almost like a tombstone to keep them. But they existed once.
Wasn't there a subtitle though?
Oh, there was. Man Boobs, A Tale of Two Titties. Man Boobs, A Tale of Two Titties, which they wouldn't let me put in at all. And so then in the last round of edits, I just put it into the joke, the actual text. And so now it lives in there. I'm pretty happy with that. But that's the title I tell people when I say, what have you written? That's the title I tell people. It gets a laugh and a chuckle. They read it. You said that too. But yeah, that was the title.
That's great. It just Tale of Two Titties just.
A Tale of Two Titties. And then RuPaul did an episode of it much after I came up with it, and I was very proud that there was a mention. Yeah.
Bridging Eastern and Western literature. Okay, this is a question that I ask all authors, and then I have one more question after this, and then we'll go to audience questions, which is this is a fill in the blank question. So in order to write a book, you need what? And in order to write a book, you don't need what?
In order to write a book, you need faith, as George Michael said. You have to, honestly, because I think that there's it becomes an act of faith after a while. It feels like you're crossing a desert and you're dead and you have no water and everyone's trying to kill you. No one wants to, and then like everyone keeps closing their doors. You go to the next village and the next one, camel comes, camel does. It's just a whole thing. And if you do not have faith, that there's no way that this is not going to end up in like a 5-star hotel somewhere. You have to have that kind of thing. That's what gets you through, right? It's the scene in Spaceballs with the princess like room service, and she goes through the death. But I feel like you have to have faith. You have to have the faith of this. Because there will be a lot of people, yourself particularly, who will say it's not worth it. You do not deserve to be in the same shelf as the authors that we're surrounded by, or that you have nothing to say, or that who would want to, we do this to ourselves. We all do it to ourselves. And I think part of being able to get through a book is not necessarily that you are more talented or you can do something that someone else can't do. It's literally the act of going through it. Just don't give up. I think so. Faith.
And what don't you need? If you're not sure, it's okay.
What don't you? There's a lot of stuff. Sciatica. There's a lot of stuff. You also need a good chair. I'm not sure if that's what you wanted, but it is a very important thing, which links back to that.
Okay, so my last question is: this book is filled with gay people, some of which are good, some of which are bad. So all of the gay people in the world, who is your favorite gay?
Oh my God. I think the answer that I gave before about the gay icons, my favorite gays tends to be the one who is able to use the things that they've gone through and the strength that they've developed, the callous that they have. Because we all have it. You can't help but grow up queer. And if you do survive, I think it's incumbent upon you, as you say in your own book, to that queers anywhere are responsible for queers everywhere. I think that is what it is. And also, that's what to me, the best gay is, but also I think that no one is their best throughout. I think there's no such thing as a perfect. It's like a model minority. I don't think that there is a perfect queer or perfect gay. What I do think is that in their moments of perfection, moments that show what an act of courage can do. I know that as one of the authors I grew up reading was Shyam Srivadhara. He's a Sri Lankan author. He writes about queer, very small mentions, but he was a 90s author. There was no one else who was talking about queerness. And I remember that. And I continue to remember that. That was an act of courage to me at that time. RuPaul doing what he did with beginning. it has done so much for queerness, and in the same way that I think, and so there are moments people can kind of aspire, like human beings, you aspire to these moments of perfection, moments of compassion. I think that's what a best day is. But I know more people gays than I know best days.
Okay, the last thing which I didn't prepare you for is I have a challenge, which is that if you can name 15 people that have won a Tony in the category of Best Actress in a Musical in 30 seconds, I will buy some in the audience a book.
Oh my God, no, I'm sorry, I'll buy you a book, but I can't do it.
Okay,
I know. God, no, you know,
No, it's okay.
The Tonys are not, because the Tonys are not broadcast internationally.
Oh,
Like a global queer identity, they are not something that go across the world. Whereas I used to grow up watching this universe. And so if you want to know that, you can like pageantry, which is weird also with queer pageants are really big in the United States. And it was one of the ways any South Asian in the audience will know how big beauty pageants are for Desi's. It's huge. It's like the only place you can, I mean, but all the big actresses come out. It's a big cultural moment. And I found so much in common with that, like the line between their gay queer pageantry, drag pageantry, and how that impulse is the same thing, to create this masterpiece of female illusion. But yeah, I'm not sure. Sorry.
that's okay. That's okay. The audience is. Okay, so I think we'll open up now for questions and answers. Do I take this mic or?
People can just be loud.
People will be loud and then I'll say it to the. Sorry if that wasn't clear. Any questions? The audience.
I don't know how to word this properly, but can you talk about the significance of Kamala Harris symbolically in America?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just so that we think that question of really
Wonderful.
I would say a really chill, super easy.
Yeah.
Maybe even one word question answer. Can you speak about the significance of Kamala Harris?
I can speak about the significance of representation, which is something that I mentioned before, because I think the act of seeing some of us who are not straight and white go through the world, get so used to not seeing ourselves represented around us that we think that you get very kind of shocked when you do see it. I remember just seeing Obama in the White House, his skin color alone, but it had such a, I mean, I know that it's to reduce something to that is not useful, but I think for a place like America, which purports to be the biggest, best country in the world, it's weird to not have had a woman president, right? It feels, Pakistan's terrible. It's one of the few things I use over college kids. But it is odd to me, and it's very clear, I think generally it's very clear the kind of direction that this country is taking and has been taking for many centuries. And one of the lines that I use in the book is that the thing about the American dream is that you have to be asleep to believe it. And I found that to be true because so much of the rhetoric, I mean, like all of you saw the debate. I don't think a debate has like two opponents. I didn't think it was a debate, but I also didn't think it's ever been a debate, which is why I'm so shocked that there's this other side to it. So, I mean, in terms of Kamala, I think I'm happy that they are running, because after the Biden debate, I was not very. And yeah, and I'm anxious to. There's a lot of problems with intersectionality, and I'm still formulating my thoughts on a lot of those. So. Yeah, it is a bit complicated, I guess, with 50 days left. My answer is not particularly gung-ho about it. But I'm happy she's there. Thank you.
Any other questions?
How did you land on that?
Oh, the question is just so everybody, how did you land on that?
The wonderful people at Abrams Press. I wanted, they sent me a bunch of covers, but I knew I wanted a yellow book because I knew from color theory that the human eye picks up yellow before it does anything else. So when you go into because of poisonous snakes. And I knew this. So I was like, I want to be the white image. So I wanted that. And then I knew that I wanted like my idea was to have two mangoes, like little titties, like on a shelf, or like two mangoes. And I was trying to explain this to them, and it didn't. They kind of sent this jewel box thing, like a tit. It was a weird kind of thing. But then one of the things that they did was send this. At the time, they had like a vulva pink kind of background with a yellow. It was a weird color scheme, but it was like the second. It was
I
the
love
second.
reading gay books.
Yeah.
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 Look around, it's all.
It does. And I wanted the breasts to be on it, and they were very cool because they added these little squiggles for. And there's a part in the book in which I get accused of blasphemy because of drawings of my tits that went out at the Pakistani customs, and this is pretty much what they had seen. So I wanted like a ghost image of it, but that's how the cover came about. And they were very good about it too. I think it really took a day.
Great, okay, I think we have time for one more question. Is that all right? So don't be shy.
Was it scary to think of writing a memoir? Why did you think of fiction before fictionalizing it, or how did you come to?
Thank you. Just, I have to say, I didn't hear it. The question, the wonderful, generous question, thank you so much. Was it scary and or intimidating to write a memoir? And did you think about doing fiction before instead?
I wrote 3 very shitty novels before, very shitty, before I went to this. And the thing was, I've always had this tone in writing. I'm unable to write any other way. Which is the reasons the novels were shitty mainly because it was this voice, but I was trying to invent stuff, but then I wanted to talk about what I wanted to talk about. I was in this absurd situation using my life to change the character. And I've always hated novelists. So I just write the memoir. It's about your mother, then write about it. If it's not, then move on. Then make like a magical world with dragons. And I'm on board for that. But if we're just gonna sit with like this thinly veiled like attack on your grandfather, like no. But so I didn't want to do that. And I've always been attracted to things like nonfiction generally. I was a columnist for many years, and that was also my first person nonfiction. But when I started to write this, I think I didn't have a choice. It was the scariest thing I did. But I have a feeling it was because I emotionally, it was kind of like ground down. I found that I was in my mid-30s, late 30s, then I got the green card and I was here. I was trying to reconcile all of the barriers to gayness and my own homosexuality that I put up, and that society had put up. The only way I knew how to do it was through writing. Not even through painting, because there's something about the bold declarative power it was that for me felt cathartic. So it was scary, but I didn't, again, it was like almost like fate. I didn't have a choice. So I knew I wanted to write it. And once I decided to kind of do it, the rest flowed. Fairly easily. What I will say is that I had enormous fear all the way up until publication day about, it's because you don't know what, I don't know. It's the first time I'm doing this, so I can't predict. And no, so my worst fears were like these large demons in my head. But I've gotten so much sincere love from people, and that from in Pakistan, and that's been very touching, if only to prove that that's why I wanted to write it. That was my act of perfection. It was my hope that I was thinking about these things and faith. Because I'd gone, whatever I'd gone through, whatever we've gone through, I'd survived as much as one does. And it occurred to me that if you didn't talk about it, there would be no record of that survival. And so it's kind of like leaving, in terms of inheritance, it's leaving little signposts. It's okay, go this way. And then they'll get there. We wouldn't have gotten it somewhere else. And that's kind of where you then figure out this amorphous queerness, because the wonderful thing is that queer people never stop being born. So it's just like an endless supply. And I think that's what despite I guess. But like it is a good I think it's a good thing when you can share yourself in that way, and just some and my own definition of even an artist has always been the same. It's someone who processes their lived experience in public so that others can do it in private. And whether you do that in painting, whether you do that in sculpture or writing or acting or anything, or politics. I think that's what I think an artist is, because the artists that affected me the most were that. There's a certain courage in their work, which lights a frame so bright that it lasts many generations. It was my hope to try and do the same.
Beautiful. I think that's a perfect note, Johnson. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.
Copies of book for sale, that. Happy to sign for you.
Chat.
Excellent.
Thank you for coming. It's very kind. Thank you very much.